consultancy firm called Future Place Leadership. I'm based in Stockholm, but I have a few colleagues in a few of the Nordic places of the Nordic countries. So we're very much a Nordic company. And briefly speaking, we work with the innovation and development of places, and we work mostly with cities and regions. And in 2018, we started a project called Nordic Placemaking with Link Architecture and the Safer Sweden Foundation. And we were in total 20 organizations, municipalities as well, regions, real estate developers, associations from the Nordics, trying to think about the state of the public spaces in the Nordics today and how we could work with this methodology that is called placemaking in the Nordics. The project resulted in a handbook. We published it in the spring. And so today I just would like to share a little bit with you what was the framework that we used both during the project and the handbook, and also share some inspiring cases with the audience. So I'm going to start by briefly introducing what we mean by placemaking and what it is, and how does it relate to the state of urban and rural developments in the Nordics today, and finally say a few words about placemaking in Europe too. So I'm sure in the room there are people that are already very familiar with what placemaking is, and so they probably know this quote from Fred Kent, the founder of Project for Public Spaces, which is the organization that is behind the concept of placemaking. And he explains placemaking like this. Placemaking is about turning a place from somewhere you can't wait to go through to somewhere you never want to live. So in short, building places that people love, places where people feel good, and places that bring value for communities. But now if you dive a little bit deeper into the methods of placemaking, the how we can achieve these good public spaces, there are two dimensions I want to talk about. The first one is human-centered design. So this idea is that cities shape us. The way we build our environment has a huge impact on people's well-being and human development. So this is here, you can see a picture of the water regeneration project Aker Brygge in Oslo. And we can see how the walkability of the space, the different urban furnitures and seating possibilities offered by the space, but also this smooth transition between the retail spaces and the street offers socialization opportunities as well as business opportunities for the different actors in the place. But there are many times where cities also fail to offer us these conditions for social and economic development and also for well-being. I think, like me, a lot of you have already experienced sometimes where the urban environment has felt maybe overwhelming or threatening or dangerous. But I'm thinking also that sometimes cities fail to accommodate for the needs of different people. And in 2019, the Safer Sweden Foundation that we worked with has published a report about public restrooms in Stockholm. And they were pointing out issues with safety, accessibility, and the hygiene of these public restrooms in the city, which was mostly problematic for women who, because of pregnancy, menstruation, but also the care of young children, are particularly in need of such amenities in the city in order to enjoy public spaces and do their own activities in the city, be independent. So here we have an example of how planning also can impact negatively people's ability to walk in the public space, to access the city, and also their health. But the second aspect I want to mention is, of course, participation. With this public restroom example, we see very much the need to involve different groups in order to understand the need. So that's one aspect of participation. The second one is also that the challenges that cities face today are so complex that we need a collective effort to address them. And now from Oslo, I want to take you to a bit more south in Norway, a place called Arendal, where despite the relatively small growth economically and demographically the last few years, the city center is experiencing some challenges linked to very car-oriented development, but also urban sprawl. And in 2015 were found with many vacant shops in the city center. And they thought that the regular traditional planning processes that they use for this kind of projects were too lengthy and too complex to put in place. So instead, in this project called Sparking Spaces, they built a coalition of 100 actors, associations, the public sector, of course, citizens, etc., the police as well. And they managed to repurpose 20 shops and also develop other placemaking activities like paintings and events and festivals to bring liveliness to the city center. Now that we've defined a little bit what placemaking is, I just want to talk about the Nordic context. And so what can placemaking bring to urban and rural areas in the Nordics? If you scroll through the reports from the Nordic Council of Ministers, there are like 3 challenges that appear for cities and regions. The first one is a polarized urbanization. The second one is increasing social inequalities. And then the last one is the environmental crisis. So if we start with a polarized urbanization, we know very much that our urban areas in the Nordics are going to grow increasingly and densify increasingly in the coming years. But at the same time, the regions that you see in red on this map, so that are more rural and periphery, are losing people today. And especially they're losing young people. So the problem that it poses is that it's putting a lot of stress on the cities and regions to maintain a good level of public services, whether because there's less people, so it's not as cost effective to keep running these services, also because new problematics appear with aging population, but also because there's an increasing demands on housing and traffic and transportation and public spaces in denser cities. And I think that this density in cities is something that we've talked about a lot recently, especially in relation to good quality of life during the pandemics. And cities have been reflecting a lot on how we can maintain this good quality of life in dense urban environment during the pandemic, where regular public spaces were not always accessible or safe to access for citizens. And this is an example from Portugal, where they closed down streets in order to open a public space close to the home of people in the neighborhood, offering new opportunities for children and their parents to come out of their apartments and enjoy safely the public space. The second aspect regards inequalities. The Nordics have been really well known for their model of inclusion and equality. And today, patterns of segregation and rising income inequalities is challenging this model. So what does it mean for us as placemakers? It means that we need to think about the inclusive cities, but also that we need to ensure that opportunities offered by cities are accessible for everybody. And this is a project in the suburb of Stockholm that opened recently. It's a cultural house that was asked by the citizens themselves, and it shows that culture and other amenities offered by cities need to be accessible for the many and not only the few, and that we need to think about this distribution of the common goods. Finally, the environmental crisis. It's very much linked to these 2 other trends that I talked about. Of course, cities are responsible for 60 to 80% of global energy consumption, as well as CO2 emissions. But also the impact of climate change is going to be acutely felt in cities in the future, whether it's the impact of pollution on health, but also heat waves, etc., etc. So the question for me is, how can we use placemaking as a sustainable urban development strategy? And there are many ways where sustainable urban development and placemaking meet. First of all, by focusing on public spaces, we can also entice more sustainable lifestyle using soft mobility, for instance, rather than cars. But also we can develop public spaces that integrate green infrastructures and help us mitigate the effects of climate change. And on the left, you can see an example from Copenhagen, which is a rainwater garden, which helps the city collecting the excess water that the sewage system cannot cope with during intense rain hazards. Another way, and I really like this project from a co-worker from the Placemaking Europe movement, René, and it's about also using our environment to educate and teach each other about nature. And so René went throughout Rotterdam to write down the name of different species of plants that were found in the cities. It's a great way to also tell people about the diversity of nature and the diversity of the local species that we can find in our cities as well. Finally, and on a more practical level, when we thought with participants about placemaking, there were three main challenges that were appearing for us in the Nordics, how we can apply placemaking as a method. The first one is achieving critical mass. So how do we create lively public spaces in areas that are sparsely populated? The second one is about climate conditions. Of course, we have harsh winters in the Nordics, a lot of snow, darkness, cold. So how do you work with this, something that is great to this great Nordicness that characterizes our environment, and make the most of it to still offer some playful and enjoyable public spaces in the winter. And then finally, the last one was more about the process and how can we work across silos within organizations and in between organizations, and also have a more long-term perspective. And this is why the model that we ended up working with in the handbook, that I'm not going to go through today, is very much about iteration, so starting small and then doing again and again and experimenting. But also the last chapter is about moving from a placemaking project to a more organic collaboration between stakeholders and long-term collaboration, and also place governance issues. And of course, this was a very fast and brief introduction of the work we did. You can download the handbook on our website or just write to me. And I just want to say a few words now that I can talk about Placemaking Europe, because it's been really, I think, a great source of support and inspiration during this project. Already in 2018, we had a chance to have the Placemaking Week in Stockholm, and we built a lot of connections there that helped a lot building this project. And you can see from our presentation that there were some examples that I took and identified through the network. So Placemaking Europe, it started during the Global Placemaking Week in 2017 in Amsterdam, where 100 European placemakers gathered and decided to launch this movement also in Europe. And in Valencia last year, we were 400 placemakers gathered. What do we do? What is our mission? We're first of all a network of practitioners, academics, policymakers that want to work together in order to create healthy, inclusive, and beloved communities around public spaces in the Nordics. And we have a Facebook group with more than 3,000 people, so please join us there. It's a great tool and platform to ask questions and help each other, and a great source of a great library of projects as well. We have a board You can see Frederick, which is going to talk really soon, as well as Charlotte, which is going to talk this afternoon. And we have 70 leaders from 30 countries. So we're many leaders actually from the Nordics. So if you're interested in placemaking Europe, I would really recommend you to scroll through this page and identify who is the closest leader, and they will help you to get in touch with us. We have 14 working groups in relation to placemaking, like housing, moving and health, inclusive city, waterfronts, and we meet regularly to move on these topics. And finally, we organize, like I said, every year, the Placemaking Week Europe in Valencia last year. It didn't happen this year, obviously, but we're still looking for a city to host the 2021 Placemaking Week. So if you want to be the first city to host the post-pandemic Placemaking Week Europe, which is probably going to be one of the most important ones, please raise your hand and get in touch with us. And yeah, and this is it for me. Thank you so much.